Good evening. I am Tomáš Horváth, and in the past I used to be a co-organizer together with André and Marta of the conference, but this time I have the honor to introduce the moderator of the following panel, and I believe that most of you will know her. Zuzana Wienk is one of the most active representatives of civil society in this country, and she works on judiciary and reform of judiciary. And I'm sure that many of you are aware of the White Crow initiative. And yesterday, this initiative has commemorated its 10th anniversary. It is an award for people who have demonstrated civic courage. Ms. Zuzana Wienk.
Prepačte, ja sa tak trochu zložito skladám.
There is too much technology around me. Good evening. Thank you very much for coming. It's a pleasant surprise for me to see that on Saturday evening we have almost a full house. I would like to introduce my guests on the discussion. The word according to Google, it will be as interesting as the word according to GARP, I am sure. Mr. Honzák, Radkin Honzák, a well-known Czech psychiatrist, is our first guest. He said he is not professor.
Máme ho českého psychiatra, pána Radkina Honzáka. Môže byť? Nech sa páči. Môžete.
Okay, so he is a well-known Czech psychiatrist.
A well-known German writer who has many professional hats and will be a very interesting addition to this debate. Then Mr. Vincenzo Susca, an Italian sociologist who works mainly in France. And last but not least, André Staltz, who is a very interesting combination of a hacker and a blogger who originally comes from Brazil, but now lives in Helsinki. So, because we have such a diverse panel, we agreed to conduct it in English, so we understand each other, but som slúbila pánovi Honzákovi, že my sa budeme...
But I promise Mr. Honzák that we are going to speak Czech or Slovak, and Mr. Honzák will answer in Czech. Okay, so we should start right away because...
Probably need translation for Mr. Honzák.
Vy samozrejme budete potrebovať preklad.
Diverse, interesting professions, but we will mainly discuss democratization, how democratization of communication and technologies basically brought a threat to democracy, and we will explore it from many angles. First, allow me to have a set of questions separately to my guests, exploring their expertise, and then we will follow up with asking the question why it happened and what we can do with it. And we would very much like to open the floor to you as well. It's a Saturday late night, and we hope that you don't fall asleep. So let me start with Mr. Koidl. You have really a very interesting set of professions. You are a German writer, and excuse me that I will not introduce your profiles in details because you are very distinguished guests. All of you are very known and selected by curators of this conference for your proficiency and your success. So I will ask the public to read the profiles if they haven't done so, and I would rather introduce you with what you say and what is relevant to this debate. So, Mr. Koidl, what is very interesting about you is that you are not only a writer, but you are an entrepreneur, and your investment company is kind of turning the traditional sectors of industry digital, if I understand correctly, and also you were an advisor in a political campaign, basically on social media. So you have a very interesting set of expertise. You also lecture communication. What you basically say is that social media are a major deformant in our society, that they have a potential to manipulate people in a way that we don't realize and we can't even imagine. You say that that people are getting information that they need and want to hear, and everything is based on psychometry of fear. These are very interesting claims that have been also written about by economists in the post-Trump era, and many US-based sites that were exploring the massive manipulation. But I don't think the technical aspect or the aspect of how this manipulation basically happens is wide known. Can you tell us how does it exactly happen, this type of social media manipulation?
Yes, good evening. I think that to make an initial statement here, that we are really in a phase where we are about to lose the basics of democracy. And the problem is that most people, 99.9% of all people, do not understand what's happening, what's going on. They don't understand it from a technical standpoint. And the matter is that what you think, what I might tell you this evening, for example, which is the reality, that this is science fiction, but it is not. It is happening, just you don't see it, and you can't feel it, and you can't smell it. If people would know, and if people would understand what is going on and how well they are being manipulated on a very psychological level, because what you need to understand is that not only social media, Facebook, Instagram, and many others that you use, LinkedIn, are systems that are made to manipulate you on a psychological level. They are actually psychological machines. And this is being used by forces that you aren't aware of, by names that you never heard of, and in a manner that is disrupting democracy and our freedom to an extent that we have to stand up and say, this is not what we want for our future. If we want freedom to succeed and not only permissiveness, in German it sounds nicer. It is, you know, what you believe to be freedom, Freiheit, is in reality permissiveness. It is the Freizügigkeit. And this semantic error is the basic of misconducting and misleading the population in a direction that most people do not understand how big the impact will be in the near future.
And can you please describe in some example how it happens, how the manipulation of politicians, for example, you have first-hand experience with that. How do politicians use manipulation on social media to get to power more efficiently?
Well, I mean, I was the leader of a campaign of a German chancellor candidate, and not only social media, but the entire campaign. So you cannot diversify, you know, this is not two different segments. This is one whole campaign. My fear is not, and I will explain, I will come back to your question in a second, I will explain in a minute how this works. My fear is not that politicians will take over the power. The real problem is that we have handed already the power to 10 multi-billionaires sitting in Silicon Valley they are actually deciding what is being discussed, what is being displayed. I have a startup that is a marketplace for contemporary art. And if we are trying to display a nude picture of the classic modern, even if it's abstract, we are not able to display that on Facebook because Facebook says, you know, we don't allow you to show that. So, you know, nudity in a 100-year-old painting of a world-famous painter cannot be shown because Facebook doesn't allow us to show this. This is very simple. This is the beginning. This is what you have heard of. What you did not hear of is the way that people in these organizations can distribute information to you one-on-one based on the, how can I say, on the preferences of your ambitions, of your ideas, of your interests. To give you an example, you have been profiled by all these companies already. There is a psychological profile of everyone in this room in Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and other social media. And if you say, I don't participate in any of this, it is happening nevertheless, because your friends do, and they submit these information about you. And this gives these, I come to the point in a second, this gives these companies the opportunity to send an individualized message. Micro-targeting is the word of the hour, an individualized message to you that is attacking you in a way that has been pre-analyzed on your psychological structure. If you are more a conservative person, if you're more a progressive person, if you're somebody who is fearing the future or who is proactive with the future, and addressing this fear the ability to do that is possible with only 300 likes that you have left with social media, or that friends that you know have left there. This is able for the political discourse and for politicians, of course, and parties, but it is moreover possible for these large organizations to conduct all of us in a certain direction because it is addressing our fears or aggressions.
This is basically nicely tied to Mr. Staltz writes about, and you wrote a famous blog that was quoted many times, basically saying that 70% of web traffic already now is controlled by 3 corporations, by Google, Facebook, and Amazon. And you claim in the article that these corporations will have more and more power and already have more and more power to kind of isolate people from the web and from the diversity. And your main claim is that the web has been dying. It has been basically structured as a democratic, pluralized, diversified tool. Why is that happening? How come that a tool that was essentially democratic and pluralistic is turning to something that is basically anti-democratic? Is it the money, the profit, or is it something else?
So, hi. I wrote this article as a curious person. I deal myself with technology quite a lot, and I wanted to understand what is actually going on here. So I digged through statistics. And when you start looking at the statistics, you know, Google and Facebook used to be interesting companies that we can use sometimes. And it's just recently that they changed to be just interesting companies as basically almost the only companies that are around. So if you look at the top 10 websites that are used in big countries such as US or Brazil or UK, you see usually 5 out of 10 or 6 out of 10 are media sites. And the other sites are usually Google, Facebook, YouTube, and the likes. And it's already established that like 3 or 4 out of 10 are Google or Facebook owned, and the media are being completely dependent on Facebook and Google. So on the top 10 websites, they have either direct influence or indirect influence, and a massive influence. How did this become from a good thing to a bad thing? I think the motivation that these companies had, I don't try to assume malice, I try to assume self-interest or just capitalism. And I think they tried to provide a great user experience. That's something that they repeat quite a lot, that the mobile apps work really nicely and everything is tailored for you. So they try to provide you a very good experience. And out of everything on the web, it turned out to be a really good option. It turned out to be the best option that we can choose out of social network or video uploading. They are the best. Now what happens in the last 3 years is that they have established themselves as being the best so strongly that slowly we started losing options. They went from being the best to the best option to being the only option, and now that there's the only option, it means that you have no option.
The question that I'm interested in is if this is not a nature of human psychology, and we will get to that. Dan Ariely, an American scientist, writes about how people find it very depressing when they have to choose from more than 3 options. So kind of like optimizing or cutting down on options is basically saving most of the humans' brain activity that they can use for something else.
It also touches the topic of belonging, because you don't want to be in a social network that no one is, but you want to belong to your community of friends, so you want to belong to that social network called Facebook or Instagram. And everybody's talking, just Google it. You want to belong to that group and also Google it. So you tend to use the same things that everybody else is using. So it's an interesting...
But before I continue with other guests of my panel, I have one more starting question from you. I read a very interesting book of one of your colleagues, a hacker who was present when internet was established, and he said that he came to this movement with really high hopes to provide democratic tools to people. And now he's very disappointed, and he says how deeply he was wrong when he assumed that when we give modern technology to people who think the same as before, that they will not accommodate it to their nature. And what he describes is that people basically chose freedom and diversity for laziness and for products and services they are getting for free. So they are basically willing to trade all their data for psychological profiling just to give services and apps for free. So is this a factor that you as a hacker spot? And another question or by-question I have is that I had the feeling when I read about these things, it's that at the start somebody has a vision to bring a tool to people and really believes that it will provide some value added. But then they require mostly investment to build that technology, energy, software, hardware. And it's such a big investment that you start to think of profit because you need that investment to be returned. And once you start making the profit, you turn to money-making machine that requires more and more. And then suddenly you give up the mission to provide service to people because it is better business strategy to manipulate them, to have them stick with your service. Is this a wrong kind of assumption that I have?
And I think the assumptions are pretty correct. When it comes to preferring, people being lazy, as you said, instead of freedom, when people want to talk to each other, they want to be efficient, right? They just want to send a message and that's it. So they will tend to prefer something that is more easy and quick. Than to prefer something that is, let's say, free or, privacy aware. But it's a big problem that a lot of people don't understand how technology works. For instance, what happens when you send a message through WhatsApp or Facebook? Does the message go directly from your phone through radio waves to the other person's phone? That's what some people think it is. But actually, every time you do that, the information goes to your telecom provider, then goes down through cables, through the ocean, and then lands in a warehouse, often in America, warehouse full of computers where your data is there, and then it goes zaps back to the other person. So yes, the way that the internet was built, it had some problems, many problems, because they didn't think that it would actually grow and become an interesting thing. And one of the problems is that there's not that many IP addresses. That means that you can't put that many computers connected to the internet. So there's a bunch of like tricks that they do. But what that means is that there's an artificial scarcity of numbers on the internet, these addresses, and that scarcity is a business, because when you have scarce resources, you have a business there. So there's this industry all around this technical flaw that the internet had, and they made a solution called IP version 6, which was finalized 20 years ago. And not that many technology, like industry companies are pushing hard to get IP version 6, which would help a lot so that we can get that situation where my phone sends a message directly to your phone. That's what would enable. So because of the flaws of the internet, it actually became a business opportunity, and it just stuck.
Let me switch to Mr. Honzák and to the psychological aspect of this all. You are a well-known psychiatrist.
So I will start to speak Slovak as I've promised to you. Sorry, I forgot. You say that a human being is not only a social being, but also an obedient creature living in herds, and that a lot of non-ethical behavior is only because people fulfill rules or orders, and most people are afraid of freedom and they look for leaders. And then you go even further and say that the leaders are mostly psychopaths who don't know any fear, and therefore they have charisma, and they make a perfect impression on the others, and those who are afraid of freedom like to follow them. And according to you, people are fascinated by the fact that this leader is as if able to bear their responsibility on his shoulders. Is this a mechanism which social media and technologies make use of today? Because we are speaking about giving up freedom in exchange for free services or more comfortable life. So what is this essence of this herd behavior, and why do we do it?
You put it so nicely that I practically do not have to say anything more. I have a professional deformation because I used to work in news, so I had to speak very succinctly. Okay, I, being a person working with people and a person who wants to learn more about people, I can generalize. I find that sociologists are not willing to admit that people are animals, and biologists are not willing to admit that people have souls. And those who believe in a hedonistic kind of work do not believe that we should abide by some rules. And then we have lawyers who have their legal writings and rules. Okay, let's go back to what had been said in the previous panel. Love was the key word, but the elemental emotion is fear, which was not mentioned so often. On Thursday afternoon, some times ago, there were dinosaurs who appeared on the earth. They had a tiny brain, and in their tiny brain they had a ganglion of neurons, which we call today a core, and this core reminded of an almond, and this is why dinosaurs started calling it the amygdala. The dinosaurs had the amygdala as the basis for emotional words, or for all the emotions that have existed ever since. The amygdala can do two things, fear and anger, and has three orders: run, attack, or stop. But the dinosaurs are no longer here, but the amygdala has survived. And if we imagine the brain of mammals, it has more emotions. The dog can feel joy. It could not have been mentioned 20 years ago, but now it can. So we have 6 basic emotions which compose or make up the entire spectrum, just as 3 basic colors make up the color spectrum. If we imagine 1/2 of a tiger brain, and when if we have this piece of cloth, this is our famous brain cortex, which has been here for millions of years, but underneath there is the amygdala with its fear and anger. They are next to one another because there is a question of minimum balance of adrenaline or noradrenaline, whether I'm going to attack or run. These are the basic emotions which are easy to manipulate. The man is a herd-like creature, and for our group, we have this social brain, which in primates differs. We have 95 people who can fit in this group. It's our tribe. In Africa, 50,000 years ago, the first pod was able to chase antelopes, and the human rights started to grow. And if we have a cosmetic spaceship, it should be cosmic spaceship, but I call it cosmetic spaceship. If there is a cosmic ship landing on the Earth once in 10,000 years, it would come up with very monotonous findings, like primitive tools. In the 7th time, it would write about the mankind being able to fly into space, etc. But with the same genes. Over the last thousands of years, we have been able to reach the notions I and we, but not I and them.
And not we and them. We have learned to say I and you and not we and them.
Okay. We also had sessions with a well-known doctor who worked with alcoholics, and we sometimes visited his sessions, and he was telling his patients, be happy to be only addicted to alcohol because there are worse addictions, and it is addictions to power. And this is something we cannot handle. And now let's consider that there is 1% of schizophrenics amongst us. There's also 1% of psychopaths. These are the born leaders because they feel no fear. To follow up on this, I read a very interesting book published in a translation in Slovakia this year. It was written by an American psychiatrist who set up the profiling section of world leaders for CIA. He says the same thing as you. He says that politics attracts psychopaths and narcissistic people. What was of interest for me was that the American Psychiatric Society for the first time proposed to rule out psychopathy from the list of diseases because it becomes a norm in a society. Mr. Koidl very described in detail how social media work with fear and psychological profiling, and I believe that social media also work with narcissism. Each of us has received one's own stage for performance, and through likes receives the feedback. And some psychiatrists say that this is an ancient addiction which goes through the old amygdala core. You don't need me at all because you can put it much better than I. Okay, is there a threat that we are going to change into a group of manipulated narcissists? There is a basic difference between one-on-one communication and communication on the social media. I would like to propose that to say that I don't even have a cell phone. I have a kind of a beeper that I can say that I can call home and say that I am safe. I normally do not use cell phones. And regarding the social media, narcissistic people are not happy. They know in themselves that they will never be able to meet the beautiful picture they pretend to be. And this is an unhappy population. When we speak together, 70% of communications are non-verbal. And when I am on a social media, I am dependent on what the person will write about himself or herself. I am dependent on the picture they display, and you would not even see how old I am because I could probably use the Photoshop to erase my wrinkles if I were there. But the herd-like nature of people means that they have the need to belong somewhere. Zimbard's experiment has shown, and Zimbard has concluded, that 90% of people, in a way, can or will do the things, if the conditions are right, the things they would never think of doing. And it's like when they say, I never, the source of this herd-like character of 62% of 2/3 of people is characterized by the readiness to give up freedom. These 2/3 do not want freedom. They do not desire freedom because freedom brings the risk that I would have to face myself. But if I am part of this mess, I will be part of the group. There had been experiments made when people would be exposed to a light point, and people would be ready to accept what is told to them concerning the distance of this light point.
So I will now stop here. I would talk now to Mr. Susca, and I will switch to English because you didn't have any chance so far, or you prefer, but you prefer to speak French.
You describe in your work that you are fascinated by how communication changes and deforms societies. So what would you add to this debate we had from a sociological perspective when you look at civilizations and nations as such?
Thank you very much for your invitation to this panel. Thank you very much for this possibility to speak in another language. The European Union will have to get used to new times without English. And sorry for this joke, but coming back to the issue, what you've said is true. And I would like to emphasize two things. The first one being that if we look at the history of modern communication, if we look at it from the viewpoint of a Western metropolis in the 18th century up to internet, movies, TV, journals, newspapers, then we can see that we have a paradoxical situation. The more modernity got established, the more people participate in the public expression. They take the floor and they take part in the dimension of publishing. And this goes hand in hand with the increase of control and hand in hand with a certain kind of increase of submission. And it's very interesting because at the beginning we were maybe a bit wild, but now when we have got modern communication, that has transformed the mass, the public, into the public, and on the other hand, this mass becoming public is linked with a certain way of control, and we are witnessing a paradox today. Undoubtedly, we have more space to speak, to voice, compared with the previous era. Imagine this freedom television has brought. It was very modern. We had programs where people became protagonists, and if you take social media, everyone has the floor there. Everyone may express their views. Any idiot may express their view in social media. And that is a paradox of today. We have conditions today when we are freer compared to the past, but on the other hand, we are also more dependent. And in spite of all efforts, it is a situation or condition we have been unable to resolve. And maybe we should focus on this. In a certain way, as you have said, we give up our freedom when we are on social medias. And we don't think that our image, our body is ours. The modern culture is based, our culture today is cogito ergo sum. I think so I am. And Descartes made an end to this sentence, cogito ergo sum. In the fortress of my spirit, that is the area, that is how to imagine freedom. And the contemporary world has surpassed this, what we have imagined. So we know that the image of us is not only our possession, and we like it that it's not our possession, and we think that it's an authentic experience as soon as we have shared it with the others. If not shared, it doesn't exist. That is, let's take the selfies when we kiss our friend at the sunset and we share it with others. It means that we have two issues. As soon as we publish something, we are sacrificing ourselves in whose name? In the name of us, in the name of a certain community. And the problem is, as you have said just a while ago, that we want to push our identity, our information to our people, that I call connective activity, connecting activity with the people who are close to us. But there are also people who steal this information. You have search engines, etc., etc. So on the one hand, there is an appetite to give reports, but on the other hand, I must also say that the problem is this invisible hand, which can make use of this information, makes use of this information, and there is maybe a battle, not a battle to get free, because the end of modern individual is here. We can't, it doesn't exist anymore. Alphabetic culture is over, but what we can do is to try to influence that we is close to us and not we in the meaning of neoliberal capitalism.
Reading your material and everything the four of you contribute to this debate, I had two feelings. One is that we are basically reliving some paradigm shift currently, which is very comparable to the printing press invention or the Reformation. So when societies got some technological tools that they have been not ready to use, and they had to cope with it, and it was very bloody in the first decades or even centuries. So that's my first feeling. And the second feeling is that basically tools that were meant to serve society need money for their existence and development. And these huge investments are also concentrating power in the hands of people who then decide ethical standards for the rest of the people. But their motivation is also financial, and it's to make profit. And it seems to me from what you have been describing that technology as a tool for communication has been basically switched to manipulation of people, because we are all humans driven by emotions and by our problems, and we don't feel valued, so we like to have our picture nicer and seen by the world. So isn't it a paradox that the newest technologies are basically bringing us back by hundreds of thousands of years to the and they are strengthening aspects of our human nature that are basically turning against the centuries of our culture's development? Isn't this type of happening that we are facing today?
There's a lot of topics here. I'm trying to choose which one. One which I'd like to continue is what you said, Mr. Susca, about how I can just share a message with a picture with just people that I want to share. Now, and what you said about that technology requires these companies to exist. Actually, that is not true. I can take a picture from my phone, and if my phone has no internet, okay, I can share that picture with you through this thing called Bluetooth. I can do that. Why can't we create social media where I have my journal here, where I say, hey, I did this today, I did that tomorrow, I mean, did that yesterday, and etc. And then when I want to share my news with you, I just do that through Bluetooth. That is possible.
But we need to be present close by, right?
We do. So what I'm trying to explain is there's a different type of technology called peer-to-peer, where it basically means I share this directly with my friend, and I don't need to do that through a company. And that is one way how technology can go forward, because it doesn't require these companies. That's the fake sort of thing that we have created. That those companies
I see it a little different, I must say. In all fairness, I think the real problem is dopamine. The real problem is dopamine. It's sitting here, and it gives you a very good feeling when you get a lot of response on likes. And that's what Mark Zuckerberg and his co-founders found out. They found out that if you produce something, and there are a lot of posters of YouTube hanging around in this Babylon theater. If you produce something and you bring it online and 5 people like it, it gives you a good feeling. If 50 people like it, it gives you a even better feeling, and it gives you a fantastic feeling if you have 1.5 million followers and this thing is being liked by 50,000 people. It is just a big kick in your head. And that is what this is all about. It's a big kick in your individual head. And coming back to what you said, which I think is really interesting, but this, what was invented now, is not a new machine. It is not the typical fear that people have when an innovation comes across. This is something totally different. And the difference lies in 2 factors. One is that you are being addressed one-on-one, individually, based on your interests up here. And that disrupts the necessity of the demagogue, the charismatic leader, the person who was able, in an intuitive way, to produce speeches in this kind of framing, you know, setting up a picture in your mind. We don't need him anymore. The new demagogue is you, because the systems, however they're named, know so much about you that they deliver an information only to you that is relevant to you, where you say, exactly, that's my opinion, that's how I always felt. And that is so strong and so effective that you cannot get away from that. You will say, this is exactly my candidate, my politician, my position. This is exactly how I feel about this. It can make you aggressive.
So are they exploiting our weaknesses? Are technologies basically like...
Not only weaknesses, our interests. I mean, look at the last discussion between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. While this was going on TV, and millions and millions of people looked at this confrontation, the Trump campaign issued 175,000 individual messages in that very hour. So everybody was told a truth and the exact opposite at the same time. So everybody is being delivered with everything at the same time. No politician can ever, you know, fulfill this, can never make this a political reality. And this is the big danger that we are facing in terms of manipulation. The second aspect is that, and my second argument is, these systems, and that is the major differentiation to all innovations that we have seen before, they can learn themselves. And one of the big, you know, artificial intelligence gurus said, you know, we have to look at human beings as people who are not really efficient. I mean, they will be in the entire process, you know, the chain, the production chain, the development chain, they are sort of insufficient. And we need to think about if the machine isn't really taking better decisions for us than we can do it ourselves. This is the future. That's what they want. And I totally oppose to what you say. I'm sorry, totally oppose. It's not, you know, just economical driven. This is, you know, we want the power of the world, and we know how to get it.
But this was exactly your argument. You said before we started the debate that the artificial intelligence is exactly something that you compare to weapons of mass destruction, because it will not need humans anymore.
So I don't see any actually opposition. I was going to say the same thing eventually about dopamine. It's true. Facebook is a psychology machine. Actually, it's very interesting that Zuckerberg wasn't just a hacker, you know, programming in his garage. He was at the same time a computer science student and a psychology student at Harvard. So he knows what he's doing. And these systems, they are meant to be psychology machines because of ads. Ads are the big purpose of Google and Facebook, and it's whenever you want to publish an ad, you're basically renting the psychological machine for a short while so that you can manipulate people. That is the whole purpose of this system. And I'd like to point something very interesting that Mr. Honzák said, that given the right conditions for something, people will do that. One of the biggest problem, in my opinion, with these systems is that they are setting the stage for totalitarian regimes, where one person can manipulate what everybody else thinks. It's a psychological machine. And once you set the stage for those people, no matter, you know, if they've been nice people with benevolence in their minds, you know, given the right stage and conditions, we can't trust them with those things.
But can I have two questions to two of you? Because you describe, it's pretty harsh statements about what is happening in the world. And it seems to me that the kind of like the future or ethical standards are decided by algorithms that we can't control because we don't understand. A bunch of people who have a knowledge which is far more advanced than you know, most of the people on the globe. So the first question is like, is there a real ethical debate in the IT world and in the political world about these aspects? And one more very practical question to you, Mr. Koidl. You have been the advisor to a campaign. Have you seen these type of practices in the real kind of campaign world? And has there been any questions that might not be ethical?
What I've seen is world leaders. I mean, a German chancellor candidate telling me, you know, should we really now oppose against, you know, Google, Facebook, and the others? I mean, wouldn't that put us in a position that, you know, could that do harm to us in the campaign? And the power of these machines are really, you know, big. And the problem is not that some political force comes into place and that some person uses this, that may be today. The problem is the machine itself. The machine will decide in the future. And why is there no debate around us about all this? Because most of the people, they give a shit. They say, that's totally uninteresting, it's technical, you know, I like this thing so much, and my friends, they are all on Facebook, and they transmit all their information, and they are even aware on how well Facebook knows them. And you mentioned psychometrics, and psychometrics is really, I feel this is insane. Psychometrics is really able to send messages in the worst manner possible, because I can trigger you on aggressions or anxiousness, and this can actually move thousands, millions of people in a certain direction. Your sexual orientation, your political orientation, if you are an activist, all this is known to the machine. Yes, it is known to political parties and political leaders. That's right. But the question here is, if we're talking about self-learning machines in the future, what will that do to us? And the biggest player in this field is a guy you've never heard of, Masayoshi Son. Did you hear the name? No, probably not. He owns a company called SoftBank billions of dollars in sales. It's a Japanese company, probably the largest player in the world for artificial intelligence. He just bought Boston Robotics. That is a company building self-learning killing machines for a war that is totally disconnected from any human interfering into the decision if a person or a country is being attacked or not. And we have to talk about this, but most people say, yeah, but you know, what I have to do with this, and I'm not really interested, and all this is so technical, boring.
Yeah, just a second. Let me bring it first to the psychology to close this loop. A zmením zase jazyk, lebo sa idem pýtať vás.
Mr. Honzák, it really seems to me that societies which have tremendous, the companies that have tremendous power in their hands today make use of the worst features that we as people have in our character. What can we do about it? If we say that many people will be ready to replace the comfort, the services for anything, is it possible to do something about it? Mr. Koidl said that this cannot be stopped. What, in your view, can be done about it? I still believe that people prefer doing good to doing evil. This is a given, because if you take a 10-month-old baby and play a drama for them, you have you play something. All the shapes that you show the kids must have eyes. The pictures must be anthropomorphic. There is a ball which it tries to move upwards on a slope, and so it is something that you show baby. And if you give such things to children would always play with the balls, with triangles, but they do not like squares. And we are talking about a 10-month-old baby. And this is, I would say, the better biological essence of a person, of a man. And another question is the environment and the way it is set up, because we have arrived at a point as a result of reconstruction of values that nothing is true anymore. And the Czechs have therefore elected Zeman as president because he does not believe there is somebody beyond him, and he calls it freedom to do whatever he wants, similar to Trump. And not even, if there were not even these technological possibilities in our society with exaggerated information, we have to characterize things as good or bad. And if we speak about the emotions, the substance of the emotions is incitement and depression. And we have a tendency to be incited because this is where we feel to be more active, better performing. And we do not even need the internet. If we speak about newspapers, the newspapers that will be picked will be those that sell better. I those papers that sell better are those who say, for example, somebody has killed an old lady rather than somebody has helped an old lady to cross the street. So if people are living a life which is too quiet, they look for something which evokes danger. When I have patients, I make use of this. The brain is working in such a way that if it compares a book with the internet, there is a definite difference, because reading a book, one needs to be alone, and but this is different.
And we could combine long and short-term memory, but we are now coming and we are now coming back. We are going back to the prairie, and we look around not to be hit by things. And so we have now this human being in savannah, and we have, in contrast to that person, we have become our own enemies. We are our enemies, not only nature and neighbors, but we ourselves, because we have this driver. It should be like that, because then it looks well. So if I understand well, you say that we are only witnessing a repetition of history. No, it can't. It can't be repeated, but it can match. I mean, it can be a good rhyme.
In the conversation.
Non, oui, tout à fait. Je crois que nous risquons de foudroyer.
We are at risk to make a mistake. In this relationship between a human being and technology, I have heard that today we are not able to control technology. We are not autonomous. We are simply not able to cope with, to control it. But basically, we are not even able to control technology. Since Renaissance till today, we've delegated all our mankind to technology, which means that this invention of new technologies, starting with industrialization, is the industrialization of a human being outside the human being. We are now completing these processes, and it was possible due to the nuclear bomb, concentration camp, Second World War. All these were events which have been the culmination or the completion of modernity. Since then, the human being has understood that it gave its power to machines, and we won't get this power back. It is not what we can regain. We cannot make a step back. We have allowed this. The only thing we can do today is that we may make use of Jean-Paul Sartre's idea of freedom. When he mentioned freedom, he said that freedom is the way to do freely what we are forced to do. And it means that digital media, the use of media, has in it a certain irony, which says that submission, dependence are integrated, and It is also the expression of the intelligence of social life and everyday life. We cannot get rid of these systems anymore. Maybe you don't like it, but we should talk about the post-humanism period. What does it mean? Does it mean that the human being is not in the center of universe anymore? This has been overcome by technology and also by the change of nature, climate change, natural disasters. We can only find freedom where it is not. And this utopia on which our communities, societies are built consisted in detaching people, but we cannot get detached, we cannot get free from the chain. It's not possible. We are linked to the chain, but we may try to find a way how to like the chain, how to dance with the chain, how to find pleasure and freedom in places where it doesn't exist. That is what we have to do every day.
People fear freedom, so it seems as we were doomed, if we were doomed. But you understand technology much more than all of us probably in this room. And one of the experiments I read about was on ethics and machine learning, and what it said is that the best way that is mostly sustainable for a human or a machine was to behave fairly and to switch only to the unfair behavior when the other side breaks the rules. But that we have tendency, you say we have tendency to good, and that the mostly sustainable behavior is ethical. And if we talk and fear artificial intelligence that will not have feelings and emotions like fear and etc., can we end up with a better world? Can we basically end up with a more ethical decisions that we would make as humans?
Yeah, this is a really good question. I'm going to talk something of what Elon Musk is doing with a company. He owns, Tesla and SpaceX, but he started a new one called Neuralink. And what Neuralink is proposing is to create the so-called tertiary digital layer. And this is quite interesting to what Mr. Honzák was saying, is that there was the, cerebellum and all those parts of the brain that have different emotions. What Elon Musk and other AI experts are saying is that this is already our third layer. That we have that. I'm only sitting here because of the internet and because of what I share to people through the internet. I can only maintain emotional connections with my family in Brazil because I have real-time texting with them. Otherwise, I would have to send letters and visit them quite rarely. So this is a pretty crazy idea. You should really read what Elon Musk is doing with Neuralink. But Elon Musk's evaluation is that, yeah, AI is going to be pretty bad because all of these companies are pressing very hard towards it, and AI is like not human. One very cool example is Google made this thing called Perspective API, if I'm not mistaken, the name. It's a tool that they made where you put some text on the tool and it tells you whether that is toxic language or not, and how much percentage it is to be perceived as toxic language. You can play around with it. It's an experimental tool. But one very interesting thing is that one employee in Google decided to speak up against things that he finds wrong in Google. Maybe you've read about it, James Damore. And it went really badly with people inside Google and also in Silicon Valley. They consider his text very toxic. So one of the experiments I did is I took his text and I put it in that tool which says whether it is toxic or not, and guess what was the result? The machine said it was 11% toxic. So what Google says as executives that this is toxic language, their tool doesn't say that it is toxic. So we're totally dealing with like a different entity here. It's not human, it's something different. It's actually based completely on math. And Elon Musk is looking at this and saying, if this just grows by itself, it will probably be the end of civilization. So what he's doing is making a backup plan so we can go to Mars And the other backup plan that he has is to get our brains as fast and as good as AI is. And he's building this company where, you know, there would be devices that are kind of like smartphones, but on your head somehow. I don't know. And they would enhance you with like global connectivity and global cooperation in an unprecedented scale. So this is real stuff. And
yeah, that's scary. But with all your knowledge, is this unstoppable?
I'd say yes. It's very hard to just tell people, stop what you're doing right now, like the Luddites, Ludditism, you know, that started breaking the machines in the Industrial Revolution. It's easier to tell people that do this thing instead. And often when we look at technology, we think that it's very scary and we're going to, like, you know, suffer a lot with it. But that was the case for fire. Fire was a technology that we discovered, and right now we have some kind of ways of exiting the building. We have learned to live in the fear of fire. It's great that we have sewage systems. All of these things are technology, and we learn to live with them. Nuclear weapons are also technology. We learn to live with that fear somehow, you know. I think we're going to get out of this, of course. We're humans. We're going to find a way, I guess.
So that's combined optimism here. I'm happy. And please let me open the panel to the public. Máte nejaké otázky, prosím vás?
I would like to turn to the audience. Do you have any questions? If you do, please come up here so that you can ask your questions using the mic so that the interpreters can hear.
It will come the time that we should go out of this planet because it will be not habitable more. It will be probably necessary to use artificial intelligence because the environment outside of the planet is too hostile and our capabilities with one brain may be probably not enough to survive. Is anyone ready to answer?
Is that a question? There was a statement, right?
No, it was question. How much artificial intelligence will be necessary or will die?
Okay.
Okay, there is a term for this. It's called singularity, and singularity is marking the point when the self-learning artificial intelligence systems are actually overtaking what human being is able to do. And singularity is a term that is going back to the 70s. So the expectations almost of everyone dealing with this is actually that artificial intelligence will be developing so rapidly and so dynamically that we will come to a point where most people will say it is better that we have the machine deciding for us. And let me give you 3 small examples to that. Self-driving cars. I mean, this is really, you know, the very beginning. This is really simple. Self-driving cars. You will have a lot of young mothers nearby kindergartens saying, I think we shouldn't have these individual drivers, you know, passing by here. It's way too dangerous. We should leave this to the automated cars because then the, you know, injuries and accidents in front of the kindergarten are way less. So, forbidden self-drivers nearby kindergarten and schools. What do you want to say against a mother like that? Everybody will say, yeah, it's way safer. The machine will decide all this is good for us. Second example, we will be switching based on the prediction. Artificial intelligence gives us the capability to predict what will happen in the future. Artificial intelligence can tell me what you are doing tomorrow. Amazon has a patent that actually delivers a book in the minute you order it. How can that happen? Because the book was sent yesterday because the machine knows that you will order it tomorrow. These prediction systems get better and better and better. But what does that do to our society? It means that sort of 11%, you may be a criminal. And how are we deciding then? Are we deciding based on the same prediction? Angelina Jolie got her both breasts taken off because the prediction of her breast cancer was 70%. It was only a statistical, figure. Just mathematics, as you said. It's just mathematics. But mathematics are leading us to real decisions and taking off both breasts. I mean, that's quite a decision, isn't it? Based on 70%. So was that good or bad? Who took actually that decision? She herself, or the machine, or the prediction? The third example. In the 30s, in the 1930s, a guy called Thomas Watson has received the big, or how do you say, orden? The medal, thank you. The big medal of Adolf Hitler in Germany, the biggest honor. Who was Thomas Watson? Thomas Watson was the CEO and owner of IBM. And he went to the Nazis and said, look, we have this great invention. It's called Lochkarten, these stripes with the little dots inside. This is the latest in technology. And guess what he proposed to the Nazis? He said, this genocide that you do on the Jews, that is not efficient. We can make this way more efficient based on this new technology. That was in the 1930s. And imagine what is able today. So this is the fear I have. And this is what, the idealization of technology, the idea, this is just another step of innovation. I can't follow this. And I'm inventing these systems. It is a real danger. And society needs to talk about this. We need to debate this. We need to debate that this dot cards, that was in the 30s. Everything about you, everything is known to the machine. And who now decides? The machine? The statistics? I don't care. I would like to leave it to human decision.
Vy točíte hlavou. Vy nesúhlasíte?
No, je to hezký.
You shake your head. You don't agree. That's nice, what I have heard, but it does not take into account the fact that people are changing themselves. Tens of years ago, we found out that we have 1.5 to 2 kilos of bacteria in our stomach, and these bacteria are responsible for the chemistry of our brain. And during the last 50 years, the theory has changed because antibiotics came during the last 50 years, and antibiotics are prevalent everywhere. And if you take manure, in manure, you see that there is a huge amount of antibiotics in them because we use them on cattle. So we see a rising number of diseases that are due to the fact that intestinal microbes have changed over the last 50 years. Second, we have hormonal contraception, which not only changes the gender of aquarium fish, but it also leads to Europe dying out. If you take a demographic picture of fertility in Europe, you can see that there are changes which are quite interesting. So basically, I have a hope.
From Bradbury's 110 degrees Fahrenheit, I believe that there will be some elites surviving and taking it into the future, and then Heidegger outcry that only a God, a kind of God, can save it. I think that God was not stupid when he made this deal with Israelites. And I remember how we were there under this mountain, and Moses went to the heaven and returned and said, I have two messages. And I came back from God, and I have two messages for you. One good and one bad.
I have 10 commandments.
The one is that I have 10. The good one is that I have 10 good commandments, and the other one is. And I also believe that we will maybe end up in some centers of gravitation where societies would be composed close to each other and not atomized into units, sitting at home watching the magic TV box. And I believe and hope that civil society, and it is really a call to the elites, which are still remarkably silent. I mean, we should call on them. I have been sick. I suffered from cancer, and I was the only psychiatrist who was ready to give interviews to newspapers to talk about what is fear and how a good tool for manipulation it is and what a strong element it is. None of my colleagues would do that. They are not ready to speak about such things. They are ready to comment on any stupidity. But then when we had a campaign, a cancer campaign, they all were silent. And this makes me angry because I believe that people who might be called elite are still quite many among us, and I don't think they should be silent. And I think that this is a good tension between skepticism and optimism.
Vlastne nemusím sedieť. Tak ja teda budem hovoriť v slovenčine.
I will speak Slovak. I have a technical question, and then I have a question to Mr. Susca. The technical question is it really so that Facebook, Google, on them, how well do they know their own tools? Because after several months of investigation, neither Google nor Facebook knew what is the Russian influence on the American election. And to Mr. Susca, my question is that we are so happy to have this chain. What would be the real picture of just to make the best of the chain? What do you see? What shall we expect?
Questions with regards to, election interference and the role of these companies and how they react. They are very secretive because they want to keep their secrets of like methods and things like that, but they are very, very, very smart. I believe they portray to be naive. They definitely know what's going on when it comes to all the data that's there. Because it's an iceberg. The system is an iceberg. We see the tip of the iceberg and we're standing on it and we're all talking to each other. But what happens behind the scenes, there's warehouses of computers. They have different types of warehouses. Some of those warehouses only have Blu-ray discs where they store things forever. They just keep it there. It's like they store it and they just, maybe we're going to need it in 100 years from now. And they have such things called logs, which are, just audit logs. And they can see exactly what someone said at some exact day and what all of the advertisers, how they advertise. They see everything. They definitely have all this capacity. Normal technology companies have this capacity of seeing logs and everything that happened. They are just very good at speaking in a hypocritical way. I believe that they know much more than what they're telling because of basics of how technology companies work, and they're just not revealing a lot. it's a game of their reputation as well. They don't know exactly if they share this, how is it going to develop. So it's a very tricky game. It's like political. It's a mess, but they definitely know what they're doing, and they definitely know what happened.
Can I just add a following question to what you are saying right now? Would a way be a push for more transparency to Facebook and Google to publish their algorithms, or to have a direct accountability to what they decide for customers?
Yeah, that has to happen through regulation, and the European Union is getting a bit tougher against Google and Facebook, but it is their jewel, their gold, to keep that data and to keep that knowledge. It is what makes their psychological machine. I mean, it's not the website with all the buttons. That's not really what makes them the best. The best is how they manipulate it in a very smart way. And it will be a tough fight, but I also believe that there needs to be a lot of regulation. In some way, regulation will just slow down what they're doing, and they will inevitably do. But also in other ways, we may gain some visibility into what's going on. The problem with
and
like,
would that help? Would this be a good tool to kind of
it could help. One of the problems that we have right now, let's say with elections or any kind of ads, how can I know what kind of political ad did you see? Because it's personalized for you. If there's like a public like election campaign going on the streets, everyone can see, everyone can publicly log that happened. I cannot know what kind of ads you saw or what you saw. So when we just ask the question, what did everybody see? I don't know, because it's personalized for everybody. And that's the problem. How can we know exactly, you know, how much interference there was? I don't know what you saw. We don't know what each other saw. And this is the interesting point, is that they are creating our realities, basically. They're saying, hey, here's your reality, here's your reality, and here's your reality. I could hide everything related to, let's say, abortion from your feed, and it would not be part of your reality. You would not think about it. You would not question it. So they are shaping our realities, and basically we have a personalized reality. And it's hard to gain transparency. So one basic thing is, how can I see what you saw in terms of ads and things like that?
And the question to Mr. Susca.
Áno, bola to veľmi dobrá otázka. Musíte si predstaviť, že za posledné 3 storočia, you have to understand that in the last 3 centuries we have seen a system of updating of masses in everyday life. Internet and web has such a dimension in which the public becomes the protagonist. And that is this joy. And it's paradoxical, and psychologists may talk about it, may say that there is a close link between pleasure and pain. When we are all together in a network via the new technologies, we live in an emotional environment. It's not a public, modern, bourgeois opinion, but it's a public emotion. And it's not accidental that the likes and followers and hearts and whatever symbolize or speak about shared emotion, shared enjoyment. It has already been mentioned. Joy, enjoyment is this moment where an individual shares with another person. It is something like a sacrifice to another person. It is like in erotic or in love. Love is no freedom. Love is dependence. So in these links and in these emotions, we see a certain way of love, in a certain type of love. And another important thing is to find out where at this platform we've detected the individual lost its autonomy and has acquired a dependence which expresses love. And we must get used to the answer, which will be we and not me. So we are used to the central position of human being, but it's more interesting to understand that it is not the human being which is in the center of the universe. This step back of humanity means that we give up something public or we share something that was not possible to be shared before. And it is important to know when we can be together without being the center of the humanity. We have maybe some more 10 minutes if there are more questions. See the first rows to be more active.
The political process that would assign those self-learning technologies and AI technologies as like public goods of like specific status, that we would gain any political or public control of this, like to keep democracy going, like some kind of like certification or governmental access to, I don't know, I even cannot imagine, to some chips, like to stop some kind of evolution of these technologies and stuff like that? Or do you think it's inevitable that one day these machines will be doing what they want and what they think is good for us?
It is difficult to get AIs in as a public owned thing because they are in America. Most of the very like edge technology AI are either in America or China, and there, you know, companies rule, and it's very difficult to sort of touch that. And I think also, even if we try to like intervene, some other companies will find a way of growing in such a fast pace that when you get to know about it, it's already the thing. Does that? Yeah, maybe that's so far I can say.
I think we missed the point. We missed already the point where we should have intervened, and the danger in this is that we have long discussions in the European Union in Brussels about, you know, whatever goes into meat or how big the letters are on a you know, prescription that goes into the box of some pills. It's all defined, but nobody really talks about it in terms of artificial intelligence and the development of this technology industry, and that has two reasons. One is these companies are extremely powerful. They have a lot of money, and they have lobbyists, you know, running. In the second a politician raises a question, they have dozens of lobbyists running there, talking to him, giving money to these parties. Also, there is, you know, a threat, an not outspoken threat that, you know, this could do harm, as I said before. This is one problem. The other problem is that the only way to resolve this would be in the entire European Union as, you know, all 28 member states. And I don't see a solution there. Whilst China is pretty good at, you know, defining what is to be produced, what is to be set up in mainland China. So there is, of course, the opportunity to regulate this development. but in Europe it isn't done. That has also to do with the fact that the present German Chancellor, Angela Merkel, is quite positive about this. She believes that this could boost German technology, that this could boost German economy. And I think that the discussion about what is the dimension of risk, if you, if I, for example, talk about this in a politics context or in a hearing, then politicians say, yeah, you know, this is a bit loud. This is all very, you know, it isn't that dramatic, Roman. It's not that dramatic. I mean, and this has to do with a lack of knowledge what's going on, and with a lack of interest in these technical aspects. And two things come together here. It is our society, how we want to live in the future. It is really a question that many people believe that machines may be deciding better for us, and that the human era on this earth wasn't really so good. I mean, probably there is an adventure in this. Yeah. You know, I mean, this is a total ethical and philosophical discussion. I intend to believe that the nature behind it is the rational, the ambition to make everything more rational, more, you know, sleek. Everything has to fit in an economic world. And in an in a very economical world, I truly believe in an inefficient world, a little bit works for a lot of people. You know, you find your way and you can make your living. In a very rationalized world, for a very little group of people, a lot works. And so I intend to believe there is a money-driven interest behind it by billionaires that are exploiting us, the people, that are taking this for their own benefit, and because they fear the development of artificial intelligence. All of these multi-billionaires, from Zuckerberg to Mr. Son, they have all bought islands. Islands far away in the ocean where they can go if, to put it in an American term, shit hits the fan. If this artificial intelligence, so to say, get out of control, they go to their islands. And this is my fear. It's the fear that we are mainly, you know, being used as consumers, but in the way of that we are just there to feed this machine, because, you know, social media is for nothing if you don't have the group of people you can sell this to.
But this is very interesting, because I read somewhere that there is a retro wave in the Silicon Valley, that all these rich people that you mentioned are actually cutting down the usage of technology by their children. So they are basically saying that to their children that they should go and play outside, and exactly what Mr. Honzák says, that return to kind of the good ways, the old ways. And the second thing that what you were saying is reminds me of what Noel Harari writes in the Homo Sapiens, is that every time a human invented something that made his or her life or our life easier, we kind of changed the way of living, later becoming victims and hostages of that change, but we could never go back anymore. So it wasn't possible, and we had to deal with that hostage situation that brought more luxury but cut down the freedom. So it seems in a way to me that history is repeating, but maybe not repeating but kind of like going in a spiral that we have
There's definitely the camp, and I belong to that, which believes that AI is mostly a danger and we should be fearful of it. But there will be also, and there is already, the camp of people who believe that AI will be great and it will just improve our lives. In fact, Google is on the path of becoming God. Now I can explain what I mean. What are the attributes of God? He's immaterial, he's omnipresent, he is omniscient, and he's all-powerful. Google already has some of those properties. They are immaterial. Where is Google? How can you touch Google? Where is Google? How can you spell Google? It's abstract, living in a network of computers all around the world. It's omnipresent. It's in all of the corners. It's probably already on your phone, and if you actually say, "Okay, Google," it may pick that up, and it's listening actively to what you're saying. It knows almost all of the knowledge that is on the internet and is trying to learn that knowledge better. So, what is it? It's an oracle. Google, what should I do tomorrow? Google, how can I live my life? These are the answers that the executives actually want the machine to perform. A basic oracle for everything in your life. And they're creating God.
Well, I think that we stick to the theme world according to the Google, but we are very far away from the basic question of democratization and preserving democracy. But that was probably inevitable. You wanted to react, and we have one more space for one more question. Go ahead.
Non, je voudrais juste
I only want to link up with this parallel between God and Google. Indeed, there are things existing in a certain continuity. We have to admit that. We always had people in our history depending on something that is higher than us, exceeding us. Always it has been like that. Are we really sure that we are slaves, more slaves today under Google than our dependence on God in the Middle Ages? And our ancestors who lived in the Middle Ages, let's remember, God in the Middle Ages was omnipresent. And did they discuss about it more than we discuss it today? I mean, we have to see this relationship in this relative approach. And we must admit that there was always a certain dependence. And then realizing this, we are knowing it, we can then find our way how to survive, have pleasure, avoid, etc. But if we take the universal truth of the universal God, then we are here rather pagans. And the fact that today we have not only one truth but more truths, that is opening ways for us to a transitory truth where you have more possibilities for expressing yourself. And I believe that in spite of everything what we can say in the context of social networks dictatorship, we have more room than 50 years ago. We have more room for diversity. We have this multiplication of ways. And this is the consequence of the diversity which always existed, be it racial diversity or sexual orientation diversity, etc. And this diversity is expressed on the social networks today. For instance, what happened with the Black movement a year ago? Due to Facebook, we've learned that there were police officers who would shoot Black people, and in 30 seconds the whole Black community knew about it, knew what happened. Remember what happened in the 1980s. And remember how police used violence against black people. So new media gave voice also to the people down at the bottom, and they can express something. We have still room for one question. If there is one question, can you can you maybe put the two questions into one? Is it possible?
There has been an agreement on the dangers of AI and its development and how it learns by itself. And in the previous discussion block, there has been an agreement on the fact that people are likely to do good not by their individual decisions, but when they have incentives by institutions to do good. So I would like to pick everyone's brain on how we could create incentives as governments and civil societies for these private companies to create initiatives like OpenAI or Neuralink to think about the long-term future and sustainable development instead of short-term financial gain that capitalism entices us to think about. Thank you.
Ja by som sa spýtala, že stále...
And my question is this, that loss of control is our problem when speaking about artificial intelligence, that we have to defend ourselves not to lose control. Now, let's imagine in theory, it might be a good message. We want to give up the control because in a way we will change. You have mentioned bacteria, Mr. Honzák, so we would become this bacteria in a bigger system, and losing humanity maybe is not bad news, because what we do now is only chasing pleasant experiences, and in this way we could maybe come closer to eternal pleasure. We would be like these gamblers playing with the one-handed. I don't know what you.
It was a question to everybody.
This is probably not possible because this drug addict or this gambler using the one-handed bandits will never be satisfied. He will never be happy. Every shot of dopamine requires more dopamine and more dopamine. So a dominant male feature is to be idle, and the dominant human feature is greediness. That is what you watch also with monkeys, who catches something and is not able to let it go. It rather dies. And we have arrived to a stage that we have corrected this through rules, this behavior, and the rules. I mean, the era is us. So why don't we want these rules?
Let me say something to this. I employ coders, and all they talk about all day is, how can we make this bug-free? I mean, how can this run in the most efficient way without, hiccups? The aim of these systems is no interference by nothing, not by emotion, not by anything that is holding up the smooth process that was designed. But humans aren't like that. The human being is controversial. It is in itself controversial. You want something today and you want something else tomorrow. We aren't perfect. We have our deficiencies. We intend to project our deficiencies onto the persons living with us. This is nothing a machine would consider to be an ideal process. And my fear is if we say, yes, there is something like a higher intelligence, which is always a dream for many people, which is always the approach of the big demagogue to move the masses in towards his direction, because he says, I'm the leader, just follow me. And now we say, it's a machine that says, follow me. Wouldn't that be perfect? Wouldn't that eliminate a lot of problems? But who actually will be eliminated then? What will be considered to be a hiccup in the sense of that machine? And I think that is why we need to discuss this. We need an ethical discussion about it, and not only an ethical discussion, we need a regulation that says, look, something is about to develop that is more dangerous than nuclear weapons and the nuclear technology. It is way more dangerous than what we have seen with nuclear technology, and we are just about to keep this demon nuclear technology, and not, see us all being killed by it. And artificial intelligence, self-learning machines will be something much bigger, because these machines will be able to decide themselves. The problem, the moral hazard in this is that the machine will take a decision and everybody on the street will say, it was not me, it was the machine. Who will you blame then? And this is the danger. And we need to discuss this now. And all these nice, philosophical approaches, the machine could be doing well to us. I think this is a discussion that could indeed, as Hawking said it precisely, and this guy is way more intelligent than I am. This could be, as he stated, the end of human being. And I think this is a process we should take part in.
But I think what was interesting about the first question was that it's a matter of incentives. And I think that it is really a matter of incentives. So could you please maybe elaborate on that, if we can introduce any type of incentives to correct this, to make a correction? And what that they could be?
No, it's the law. We need the law. We have a system that is really made for this, and that's the law. And we need to, my personal idea is, or my personal assumption is, Facebook and Google will not survive like this. They will be split up within the next 5 years, because this is so powerful. This is affecting so many people in the world. This is affecting billions of people. And, the governments will not leave it in the hands of 1 or 2 or 3 people, literally, to take the decision over human mankind as a total. So I think we need to take this decision. And I do sincerely hope that a new generation of younger politicians come into place, understanding what's going on, and also making this shift from one political generation to another, saying, look, the way you have decided, the way you have set up your political career in the past, that is not how this is going to be in the future. We need people being at the age of 25 or 30 or 35 in parliaments, taking these decisions, speaking up, and actually, telling an elder generation, I'm sorry if I say that, but I don't mean it. I don't mean, really. I would be totally upset if there would sit a younger man and say, get away here. But this decision needs to be made fast, because this development is so hyper fast that politicians now are speaking, to take something of the political discourse, about fake news, and they think that's the hot thing. But that is old rubbish. I mean, that was something we discussed 5 years ago. Now we talk about psychometrics and the way to influence people in a very, very sophisticated way. Psychometrics? What's that? A new story? Get away. Let me talk about the climate change. That you know. So the problem is, who is interested in this and who actually has the power to install laws and regulations that are made for every one of us. Because if we have a discussion like this in a parliament or in a private place, everybody says, oh God, it's techniques, get away with it.
Any ideas to finish this panel, because we need to wrap up? Any ideas to finish this with some solutions? Some solutions? I think that we can have endless round of questions, but do you have any solutions?
J'aime pas le mot solution.
Mám vlastné řešení. Okay.
No, I have no solution. This is a tragic epoch, but that is also a manifestation of the vitality of this tragedy. I think there is one interesting aspect, and that is that in this mass of everyday life is that the mass has always resisted what has been imposed on it, always due to this culture. The mass has always found a solution and has achieved freedom. That is how samba was born in Brazil. It was the dance of the slaves. Or take techno music in difficult periods, was born in difficult periods. So we need to find not how to get off the chain. No, we must learn how to play together. The mankind is not making a real step backwards. There is a small step backwards together with a dance movement and this element of dependence on other people. We should never forget this close link between erotics and death. Something is dying, but we also need to see what is being born in this ceremony, in this catastrophe, because a new life is born there as well.
So if you ask me what is the solution to this thing, I start thinking, how can I build a solution? I'm working on that. When the nuclear weapon was a big thing, what some people did was they started building their own shelters, so nuclear bunkers that they made under their house or something. There is the technological equivalent to that, and that's going off the grid. You're going without internet at all. I'm part of this group of programmers in New Zealand and Hawaii. Some of them, it's a group called Solar Punks. One of them just built his own house. He has solar panels. He does not connect to the internet often. He has his own garden. He is fully self-sustainable. And it sounds crazy, but when there was, the Titanic ship, it hit an iceberg. For a while, that ship kept on going for 1 hour, and everybody was just, chilling out and stuff. And a rescue boat looks pretty lame. It's not as nice as the ship. But when things start going bad, you're going to go to the rescue boat. And it sounds crazy, but this is something that there are real people behind this. I am part of a social network that is off the grid. You don't need the internet for it. You can use the internet if you want. And it's how we have found. It's our small rescue boat. And when things go bad, we're going to just stay in it.
I have a simple solution for you. Delete your account.
It's already deleted.
That's what I wanted to say. We can always pull the plug off. So let me finish the panel. I would go on because it's such an interesting and thrilling debate, but I'm afraid we will not solve it tonight. And it's an experiment that we will see how it develops. But I want to really thank you all for sticking with us until such late hours. And I would like to really thank my distinguished guests for a very great debate and very interesting debate. So let me start with Mr. Radkin Honzák. Thank you very much. Roman Maria Koidl. Vincenzo Susca. And André Staltz. Thank you so much and have a good evening. And thanks the Central European Forum for such a platform.